Hi, it's Matt Thomas back on Sonic Academy, and today I'm feeling a little polyamorous. Why is that, you ask? Eager to know more about my multi-partner sex life. Well, I'm going to disappoint you because I'm feeling polyamorous because of the Jupiter 4 polysynth. They say to kind of do these video things, you've got to sort of come in, like, and grab people's attention, and yeah. Okay, so why am I excited about the Jupiter 4 from Roland, who've released it as part of their Roland Cloud software series? Because it's a recreation of the first Roland polysynth, which is worth getting excited about because it was a beautiful little beastie. It's overshadowed quite often by the Jupiter 6 and of course the Jupiter 8 that followed it. But the Jupiter 4 is something special all of its own. And I've got one like right in front of me, which unfortunately you can't see because the way this shot is framed. So 1 second now. I'll show you now. Right, here we go, folks. Get ready. So there you go. Jupiter 4. Lovely, eh? Right. We're going to look at the similarities and differences between this thing and the software version. We're going to see if it sounds the same, because if it does, that's something to be excited about. On paper, the Jupiter 4 is not very exciting. It's a 4-voice polysynth with a single VCO, a couple of envelopes, a nice low-pass filter, a little high-pass. You might think, well, that sounds like a crippled Juno. It's just not. It's a really gorgeous old analog, and they've sort of got something in those early circuit boards that's a little bit sexier than the recent sort of kind of micro circuitry stuff. Shouldn't make a difference? Definitely does. Jupiter 4's got that. If this plugin's got it, we are quids in. So let's have a listen. Okay, so we're going to compare the hardware and the software by going through some of the original Jupiter 4 presets. Okay, so that was the bass, and now this is the string preset. Next is a funky clavi. I apologise for my funk. Now, piano. Brass. Next we have the all-important trombone. And the last one we're going to look at is the force. So what do you reckon? I think it sounds pretty good myself. It's not going to match the Jupiter 4 in front of me perfectly every time because this is one 40-year-old Jupiter 4 that's aged in its own particular way. So they're not going to magically guess how this one has gone and make a plugin that goes exactly the same way in terms of little variations. But you can hear the stuff is very much from the same sonic place. However, there are differences. I'm going to show you a few now. First of all, the envelopes are a lot shorter, which probably isn't very hard to fix if Roland want to do that. I'll put a long filter envelope sweep on, you'll hear it now. So there you go, clearly quite a bit shorter. Another thing, it's rather esoteric, but it's one of my favourite things about the Jupiter 4. When you use the Arpeggiator, it's polyphonic. I don't mean it's playing multiple notes at once, but it's using all 4 voices. And that doesn't really make much difference until you press the hold button. And when you press hold, the voices kind of sustain over each other. It's a really particular sound that I really like. I can't get Roland Cloud Jupiter 4 to do it. I'll show you how the real thing sounds. Sounds great. So I'm going to try doing that on the cloud. So I put the hold button on and nothing. Doesn't do it. In fact, it's not holding any of the notes I'm playing on my MIDI keyboard. Interestingly, if I use my mouse, they get held, those notes. Watch. If I click and click, yeah, they get held all day long. And if I now play MIDI notes, they get added. You can see there. But only as long as I hold them. Strange. So staying with the Arpeggiator, to the left of the LFO section on the hardware, there is an area called Trigger. What Trigger does is it creates a sort of sample and hold effect in time with the Arpeggiator. I'm dialing it in now. And that's lovely. It's one of the best things on the Jupiter 4. It's not on the cloud. The whole Trigger as a separate modulation source that creates a sample and hold signal, that's been removed. There's sample and hold as an option in the LFO, but that means your LFO isn't doing anything else. With the original Jupiter 4, I can have the sample and hold from the trigger, and I can also dial in the LFO. As you can hear, that's creating quite an interesting load of wobbling modulations. Can't quite do that on the cloud. Similarly, once I've got the LFO at speed I want it, there's a whole section here called delay bend, which is like got what's called an LFO bend control, and that's gone from the cloud as well. It's kind of a performance thing because it means you can always easily slip back to that LFO speed I chose before because there's a little center click on the slider. But I can also increase it, roll it down. Explore all these really satisfying mad areas. And then just slide it straight back to where I was. So the original presets were a pretty handy way to compare the hardware and the cloud versions of the Jupiter 4. However, I know not everybody was sitting there sweating on whether or not they got the trombone right. So here are some sounds I've put together myself. They show off the sound of the Jupiter 4 and also some of the extras that Roland have added to this cloud version. It's only a one oscillator synth, but it has an awful lot of oomph in that oscillator, particularly if you stack it in unison, because then, of course, all four voices are stacking their single oscillator on top of each other. So you get a really fat mono synth out of the Jupiter 4, don't forget that. Now, it is also, of course, blessed with rather nice pads. If you go into options, we can increase up to, as I have here, 8 voices, so you can make your Jupiter 4 a bit of a Jupiter 4+4. So yeah, big pads, obviously with the extra polyphony, a huge thing for the Jupiter 4. Bass lines. Big, slurry, wobbly sub. If you really dial in a bit of resonance, you can hear as that drops off, that hum. So some proper sort of subsonics we had, and if you, with this patch, mess with the sustain, you can find that. There. Great filters on the Jupiter 4, so it's really good for any kind of resonant, and also take the resonance right out, and super fat, very solid dry bass. So yeah, use it for basses. Arpeggios. It does them as well. Now we've got a little trick that's on the original Jupiter 4 where you could press the unison and arpeggio up at the same time, and then it created like an auto gating chord. It's been made like an option here in the Roland version, so you just stick it on chord in the ARP mode and you get a repeating sort of blum 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 like this. Which is nice. You've got the auto gating chord there, and you've also got some portamento, so you get this kind of slurring, dum dum dum, nice plucky thing. Now, that's kind of obvious stuff people get at Jupiter 4 is kind of big basses, big pads, and some kind of little plucky stabs. Now, somebody who hammered the Jupiter 4 was Vangelis, who passed away last month, sadly. He's always associated with the CS80, but to be honest, the Jupiter 4 was there for all of those kind of key late 70s, early 80s albums. And it's all over things like Blade Runner. If you go and look at the scene, well, I mean, look at any part of the film, there's little sort of chiming, tinkling, twinkling sounds all the time. They're not exclusively Jupiter 4, but a lot of them are. There's a scene set in J.F. Sebastian's apartment in the morning where he's making eggs for the two replicants, and it's a sort of childlike sound to the whole thing. There's lots of dolls and toys around. And it's things like this, these little fast, super speedy LFO things that are all through that film, creating like chimes and tones, and often it would be just a bunch of Jupiter 4 stuff just layered up, creating those kind of ambiances. So there you go, just messing around with even one patch there. It's the sort of hyper-fast LFO rate stuff. You send that into the VCO, the VCF, the VCA, any or all of those, and the depth kind of creates these really wonderful metal sounds. Just depends how sort of powerful a sound you're after. So lots of those repeating sounds in the background. This is it. If you want a bit of sort of variation and wobble, you'll notice in some of these sounds I've used a circuit mod. If you listen, and this one, I've got it set quite high. And it's creating variations every repeat. If I kill it off, you see it's much more dependable. So circuit mod is modelling the instabilities that creep into a Jupiter 4 with age. So yeah, LFOs, get them, switch them up fast, put them on deep on the various VCO destinations, put an Arpeggiator on, have a mess. So the last thing we're going to do is look at how you can get some Jupiter 4 sounds using Sonic Academy's own Anna 2. I spent about half an hour really trying to dial one in, because as we've seen, Roland had quite a bit of trouble getting the Jupiter 4 right, so me just switching on a couple of waveforms and going, yeah, that's it. Wasn't really going to cut it, so how to play, and what I come up with is this. This is my clone of the Jupiter 4 string sound. I've got the real Jupiter here, and here's the copy. I'm quite pleased with that. That took a while. So here's how it's done. Saw, use the Jupiter sawtooth. Clever, eh? Yeah, but obviously a very simple thing to do. One oscillator only. We looked at the 101 previously, and that had a waveform mixer. We don't have that here. So with a single oscillator, we can just use one oscillator. And if you want to change waveforms, there are saw Jupiter, and there is also square Jupiter, etc. Yeah. So use the Jupiter waveforms where you have them. We've got a sub-os if you want it, so you can dial that up as required. That's it. There's a noise source over here as well, and that's our sound palette. We've got the one oscillator, the noise, that's done. Filter-wise, on the Jupiter, you've got the high-pass filter, which is shown as happening before the low-pass on the circuit diagram. I've had a mess for a while with the high-pass. That was the main thing, got the sound right. The Oberheim high-pass has something going on which works for the bottom end of these sounds. Otherwise, it all gets a bit harsh. But the Oberheim high-pass, no resonance, just set the cutoff where you want it. And then that goes in a series. So this filter comes first and it's fed into the Roland filter. We've got Roland low pass. I've driven this one a little. It just makes the sound a little fuller and more analog. The envelopes I've switched to analog, so we've got a filter envelope and amplitude envelope, because we've got two envelopes on the Jupiter 4, of course. You can use those individually. Got those both set to analog, means they're a little smoother. Over here I've got LFOs. I'm trying to recreate that thing where we have the LFO, like the main modulation LFO, and I've got that currently, as you can hear in this patch, it's modulating the pitch. The depths here. Obviously that can be routed to the VCF, etc. as required. But because the Jupiter 4 has that interesting sort of sample and hold trigger mod as well, I've set that up here. Now what I've done is I've left LFO1 not synced to MIDI. Okay, so that guy runs at whatever rate you set. I've done LFO2 in the same way that on the Jupiter 4, the VCF mod is locked to the Arpeggiator. What I've done is synced this sample and hold circuit to the track BPM. So if I use that in conjunction with the ARP, I've set you up the nearest thing I can get to the sound of that kind of polyphonic ARP. Again, this is a tricky one to get right. So I've put in these long held notes. So this is emulating that Jupiter 4 Arpeggiator with the hold control on sound. So that now, if I give us a chord, okay, so we've got that long held tails. The only problem we've got is when we get to the end of the arpeggio, unfortunately those last notes cut off, so there's a slightly truncated sound. You can get around that if you're trying to copy the Jupiter, stick a load of release onto the amplitude. So with a bit of fiddling, you can get the Jupiter 4 polyphonic arpeggio with the hold effect. It's kind of groovy. And I can add that filter trigger trick to it. So we've got two LFOs, as it were. We've got the VCO sorted, we've got the sound, we've got the filtering. Polyphony, drop it down to 4. And there you go, it's going to start behaving like a Jupiter 4. Besides that, an ensembler. Here we are back on the original Jupiter 4 with the ensembler on. And so similarly, I'll just turn this arpeggio off over here. Here's the Anna version. And with ensembler. I've spent a while trying to get the ensemble the same, and I really can't quite nail it. If you do better, let me know. There's something a little bit too fast going on there. I'll slow it down some. But yeah, maybe take some of the top. I was half an hour getting this far. I'll stop there. But you can hear, essentially, we've got something in the area with the ensembler, and without the ensembler, I think we are very close. So that's it. Jupiter 4 on Anna. Have a mess with that. See what you come up with. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed this, Sonic Academy are running a Synthwave takeover this month. It's still going, so jump onto the website and see what else is happening.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate all the support from you guys. If you love this video, then smash a like, and if you want to be notified about new videos, hit the subscribe and notification buttons. Peace!